So, here's a fact that kinda blew my mind when I first sat with it. Almost every computer you've ever touched, your phone, your laptop, the servers training the AI you talked to this morning, all of it runs on the same basic trick. We shove electrons through tiny channels of silicon and we count when they show up. That's it. That's the whole magic show. And for about 60 years or so, it worked beautifully because we kept making those channels smaller and smaller and packing more of them onto a single chip. But we're running out of room. Moore's Law, the old promise that chips roughly double in power every couple of years, has been gasping for breath for a while now. Clock speeds basically stopped climbing over a decade ago, and the elephant in the room is energy. Pushing electrons through metal creates resistance, and then resistance creates heat, which is the enemy. And that's why the modern data center looks less like a computer and more like an industrial cooling plant with a few chips bolted into it. And here's the part that should make all of us pay attention. The AI boom is pouring gasoline onto the fire. Goldman Sachs has projected that the data center power demand could jump something like 160% by 2030. We are quite literally asking the grid to feed an appetite that the grid was never built for. So the obvious question is, what if we stopped using electrons to compute? What if we used light instead? And that's exactly the bet a small team in Germany is making, and honestly, I think it's one of the most exciting bets in tech right now. The company is called Acatonics, and they're based across Munich and Berlin. They were founded back in 2021, and their goal is gloriously ambitious. They want to build the world's first true all-optical processor, not a chip that uses a bit of light here and there for the networking part, which is already common, but a general-purpose processor with an actual computing, the logic, the math, and the ones and zeros all happen with photons. Light in, answer out, electrons mostly left out of the party. They call it an XPU, a cross-domain processing unit. The idea is to combine digital, analog, and even quantum photonics on a single platform. And the reason that matters comes down to the basic physics of light versus electricity. Photons don't push back on each other the way electrons do. They travel at, well, the speed of light, and there is very little of that energy wasting resistance. So you basically sidestep a huge chunk of the heat problem right at the source. But the real party trick is something called wavelength multiplexing. Because light comes in different colors, different wavelengths, you can send many separate streams of data down the same path at the same time, each writing its own color. Try that with electrons and they just smash into each other. With photons, you get this effortless parallelism baked into the medium itself. Industry estimates from groups like Cambridge Consultants suggest replacing electrons with photons can deliver roughly a tenfold jump in energy efficiency and somewhere between 10 and 50 times the bandwidth. Those aren't small numbers. Those are the kind of numbers that rewrite an industry completely. Now, every good moonshot has an origin story, and this one is genuinely great. Acatonics was started by two people, Michael Kistner and Leonardo Delbino. Michael is the CEO. His background is honestly all over the map in the best way possible. He's got a PhD in deep learning. He grew up between Iran, Indonesia, and Singapore before moving to Germany at 18, and then he spent years working in cybersecurity and chip security. The childhood dream of computing with light had been rattling around his head for ages, but it really caught fire at the end of 2019 when Microsoft showed off storing data inside a piece of quartz glass. Then the pandemic hit, the world locked down, and Michael did what a lot of us said we'd do with all that time, but essentially didn't. He actually went deep. He read hundreds of research papers hunting for one specific thing, an optical transistor design that could realistically work. And here's where it all clicks together. The paper that fit the best, the design that actually made sense for what he was imagining, belonged to a physicist named Leonardo Delbino. Leonardo had spent over 15 years buried in lasers and photonics with a PhD in applied photonics photonics and postdoc work at places like National Physical Laboratory and Max Planck Institute for the Science of Light. He's the kind of person who designs lasers to trap ultra-cold atoms for fun. So Michael reached out, they connected during COVID, and the two of them basically decided to go build the damn thing. Michael describes their approach as top-down, and I love this framing. Instead of starting with a tiny optical part and asking what it could maybe do, they started by asking what an optical processor needs to be in the end, and then worked backward to the physics required to get there. That is a very different way to attack a 60-year-old problem. Okay, so big dreams aren't cheap. What have they actually built? This is where it gets real. In February 2024, Acatonics demonstrated what they describe as the world's first general-purpose all-optical 2-bit CPU. Now, a 2-bit processor is not gonna run your video games, but that's not the point. The point is that they've proved the core concept actually works. They showed that a general-purpose processor can run entirely on light, end to end, and that's equivalent of the Wright brothers getting 12 seconds off the ground. Short flight, enormous implications. And the design choices around it are clever. The team has been building their chip to live in the real world and not just a lab. Their XPU is a Photonic RISC processor designed to slot into data centers with familiar interfaces, things like InfiniBand and standard networking ports, running as a device under Linux, even staying comparable with normal x86 processors. They've talked about getting classic software, including a Doom demo, running through their architecture, which is a wonderfully nerdy way of saying that this thing is meant to be programmable like a real computer, not a science equipment. They abstract the weird photonic stuff away so software people can just, use it. In November 2024, investors clearly liked what they saw. Acatonics raised 6 million euros in a round led by Matterwave Ventures, with backers including 468 Capital, Bayern Capital, Runa Capital, and others, pushing their total funding to around $9 million. Their plan was that money is to deliver the first-generation hardware to pilot customers and to demonstrate a full prototype, the Beast chip, by 2026. As of this year, they are a team of around 40 people. Small, sharp, and moving fast. There's one more piece of this that I genuinely find important, and it's where this story stops being just about cool physics. Acatonics is building with what they call a purely European supply chain, from fabrication all the way to packaging. They're planning to make their chips at around 130 nanometers, and here's the kicker, that's a mature, well-understood process. There are already dozens of factories across Europe that can do it. They don't need a brand new $10 billion fab and a decade of waiting. They can use what already exists, and that matters for two reasons. First, sustainability. Making traditional electronic chips guzzles ultra-pure water and runs through an enormous number of process steps. The optical version, by their account, is simpler and far less thirsty. Second, and this is the bigger one for me, sovereignty. We're talking constantly about who controls the future of computing, and the honest answer right now is a very short list of companies in a couple of countries. Acatonics is a reminder that the world-changing chip innovation doesn't have to come out of Silicon Valley or Taiwan. It can come from a lab in Munich. So here's my take, and I'll be upfront. I'm a fan. Are there risks? Yes, of course. Getting light to interact with light is famously hard, and building optical memory is a genuine challenge, and scaling from a 2-bit demo to a chip that competes with monsters Nvidia chips is a mountain. They're also not alone, with players like Q.Ant already putting photonic processors into supercomputing centers, and so the race is definitely on. But that's exactly why I find this so compelling. They're not chasing a trend. They're trying to fix the actual physics that's holding all of the computing back, and they're doing it with a tiny team and a clear-eyed top-down version. If even part of this works, we're looking at AI that runs on a fraction of the power it burns today, and a piece of that future stamped with a label that says Made in Europe. That's a bet I'm more than happy to watch play out.